Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever felt, stuck, like you're putting in the hours, working incredibly hard, but just not speeding up your growth the way you want, well, then this deep dive is definitely for you. Today, we are tackling something really core, the mechanism that separates just stagnant effort from real rapid professional development. We're talking about the intertwined arts of constructive feedback and systematic reflection. Because improvement, as we've learned digging into these sources, isn't just about blind effort.
Not at all. It's about strategically, consistently figuring out that gap between where your work is now and the optimal standard you're actually aiming for, and then closing it.
Exactly.
And look, this isn't just theory floating around. One of the texts we looked at quotes Roundtree, and it just nails it, saying, feedback is the lifeblood of learning, and it must be kept flowing.
That's such a powerful image, isn't it? The lifeblood.
It really is. It tells you feedback isn't some, optional extra or a punishment. It's fundamental, biologically necessary for growth. If that flow stops or the system can't process it, well, development just stalls out.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack that whole architecture, the flow, as you called it. We're going to define what truly excellent feedback looks like, getting way beyond just good job, and then we'll get into the details of that systematic internal process. Reflection. We're really fusing these two ideas so that you, listening, walk away knowing the exact mechanics you need, how to leverage both feedback and reflection for accelerated growth. This isn't generic stuff. It's a proper roadmap to becoming a self-directed, adaptive expert.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. The definition. Feedback, at its core, is described basically as a dialogue about your performance and the aim, specifically development and improvement.
That word dialogue really jumps out, doesn't it?
It's key.
Yeah, it instantly reframes the whole thing. We often think of feedback as just, a one-way street, like a report card or some critique handed down. But the sources are clear. It's formative assessment. It's a tool you use while the work is actually happening. Think of it less like a final grade, an audit after everything's done. It's more like the constant course correction of a ship sailing towards a harbor.
That's a great analogy.
Right. If the captain only checked their position like a mile out, they'd probably end up on the rocks. Feedback is those constant real-time checks, speed, wind, direction, letting you make those small, immediate tweaks that make sure you actually arrive where you want it to go.
And that constant course correction, it points right to the more formal goal of the whole process. Materials explain it. Basically, feedback is where learners get information they need to appreciate the similarities and the differences between the proper standards for some piece of work and the qualities of their own work.
Okay, yeah.
And the whole point is to use that understanding to generate improved work next time.
That's a bit academic sounding, maybe, but the core idea is super clear when you think about it as gap analysis.
Exactly.
Let's take a real-world example. Say you're building a complex financial model. The appropriate standard, the goal demands accuracy, yeah, but also scalability and a really transparent documentation. Now, your model, the qualities of the work itself, it is accurate, but maybe the documentation is messy, hard to follow, inconsistent.
Right. So feedback shouldn't just be your model's hard to use. That's evaluative and honestly pretty useless.
Tells you nothing.
Constructive feedback points out the deviation from the standard. It might say, your documentation misses explanatory notes on the first 15 input fields, which breaks the departmental standard for scalability. See, it quantifies the gap.
Okay. It gives you something specific you can actually fix.
Precisely. So it becomes assessment for learning, not just assessment of learning.
And the ultimate point of this whole feedback mechanism, it's not just fixing mistakes, is it? It's fundamentally about driving growth and reflection. It kind of shifts the burden of learning, doesn't it? From the person giving the feedback onto the person receiving it.
Absolutely. The feedback needs to move beyond just criticism, even if it's, necessary criticism.
Yeah.
It should become a prompt for self-coaching. The best feedback, according to the sources, automatically gets the receiver thinking about 3 key questions.
Okay, what are they?
First, what did I do well? You got to reinforce what works.
Right. Makes sense.
Second, what can I develop? This forces you to look honestly at that gap we talked about. And third, and this is maybe the most critical, how can I do that? This is the action step. What's next?
I really like that focus on future action. It turns feedback from potentially, a painful look back at the past into more of a blueprint for what you do next. If someone just tells me what I did wrong, I might just feel bad.
Right. Demotivated.
Yeah. But if they frame it around those 3 questions, I leave with an actual plan. It encourages that self-directed learning we're aiming for.
And that learning input, it doesn't just come from your boss or your teacher, right?
Yeah.
We sometimes have a narrow view of where feedback comes from, but the sources we reviewed, they highlight a much broader landscape. Lots of places you can get input for well-rounded development.
Yeah, the list had the obvious ones like teachers and supervisors, but it also mentioned peers, which is huge. And even books like Established Best Practices or Codified Knowledge.
And specific contexts, like patients in a clinical setting giving feedback.
Right. And critically, feedback also comes from yourself through your own reflection, which kind of brings it full circle.
Exactly. And that's why getting feedback from lots of different sources is so important. You get that 360-degree view. It stops you relying on just one potentially limited perspective.
It's also a vital cross-check, isn't it? Like, say your supervisor always pushes you on speed, 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 but then three of your most successful colleagues tell you, no, your meticulous attention to detail, that's actually your superpower. That's what makes your work stand out.
Mm-hmm. Now you've got richer data.
Hmm.
Conflicting, maybe.
Yeah. And you have to reflect on that difference. You have to decide, okay, which standard matters most in this context for my goals? It forces a deeper level of thought. Okay, let's unpack this a bit more. If we're saying feedback is the lifeblood, we need to know what makes for, healthy blood flow. We need to get past those vague, sometimes painful comments and really understand the features, the characteristics that separate just generic input from truly constructive feedback, the kind that actually makes a difference, that drives real change in behavior.
Well, first off, let's just state the obvious. Not all feedback is created equal. Our sources actually break it down into three high-level types. There's what they call outlier feedback.
Outlaw.
Yeah, that's like the strange one-off comment that seems totally disconnected from everything else. Maybe it's based on the evaluator's personal bias, or they were just having a bad day. It doesn't really fit the pattern.
Gotcha. Okay, what else?
Then there's mainstream feedback. This is the common consensus. Your slides looked good, or the report was on time. It's reliable, probably true, but often. Well, it lacks depth. Doesn't tell you much.
Okay, surface level.
Exactly. And the third type, the one we're really chasing, is insightful feedback. This is the gold standard. Insightful feedback connects the dots. It links a specific thing you did to the bigger picture, the broader strategic implication.
Ah, okay, that's a huge difference. Let's make that concrete. Say you run a big marketing campaign. You get 50 reviews back. 48 of them say, great visuals. Okay, that's mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Nice to know, but...
Right. But one reviewer says, hang on, the core value proposition you've put on the landing page, it doesn't actually line up with our big strategic shift towards Gen Z consumers that we decided on last quarter.
Boom. That's insightful.
Yeah. That one comment connects the tactical thing, the web page text, back to the strategic mission. That's where the real learning happens. And that's the kind of feedback you need to learn how to spot and maybe even ask for.
Definitely. And to give and receive that kind of quality input, we need to get into the architecture. The sources lay out several paired dimensions, sort of like sliders, that define what makes feedback constructive.
Okay, let's break them down.
The first pair is absolutely fundamental: descriptive versus evaluative. Constructive feedback has to focus on describing what happened, not judging how good or bad it was.
This is where it often goes wrong first, isn't it?
So often.
Evaluative feedback just triggers our defenses immediately. If I say, your sales presentation was terrible, what happens? You instantly shut down or want to argue.
Right. But if I give descriptive feedback like that security camera, just recording the facts, I might say, during the Q&A section, you didn't directly address the competitor's pricing point that came up, and you spent about 45 seconds apologizing for an old slide graphic.
Okay, see, the difference is massive. Descriptive feedback gives me actual data points, things I can isolate and think about how to correct.
Exactly. Whereas evaluative feedback just gives an unfixable subjective judgment. It inspires excuses or resentment. One empowers the learner, the other. Well, it shuts them down.
Okay, what's the next pair?
The sources really stress the need for specific versus general feedback. General feedback, it's not just unhelpful, it can be incredibly frustrating.
Oh, yeah. Do better. Thanks.
Exactly. If you're mentoring a junior developer and you just say, your code quality needs work, that's general. What does it even mean? Inefficient algorithms, bad comments, naming conventions, who knows?
Impossible to act on.
Right. But specific feedback gives precise instructions. Like, okay, see this function calculating the user discount, it's got a complexity of O(n) squared because you've got an unnecessary nested loop in there. have a look at using the map function instead. That should get it down to ON.
Now that I can work with. That specificity is the lever for actually changing something. And the insight here for the person getting the feedback is crucial too, right? If you get that vague stuff, you have a responsibility to push for specifics. If someone says, you seem distracted, don't just accept it. Ask, okay, interesting. Can you maybe describe a specific time or instance where my behavior came across as distracted? That would really help me reflect on it.
That's exactly right. You're pulling the feedback into the specific zone where it becomes useful, which leads us to maybe the most crucial dimension for psychological safety and actually making change stick. Feedback needs to focus on behavior, not on personality.
Yes, this one is so, so important. If feedback attacks someone's character, their identity, forget it. It creates an identity threat and change becomes almost impossible.
We should probably all tattoo this on our foreheads. Like you said, if I say, you are lazy, I'm attacking your personality. It feels fixed, unchangeable, and honestly, it's just inflammatory.
Right. But if I say, you arrived 10 minutes late to the last 2 team meetings, which meant we had to push back the agenda, that's behavior.
Exactly. It points to an action that's entirely within your control to change next time.
The sources are really clear on this. You can change your filing system, your communication habits, your timekeeping, but trying to change someone's core personality through a performance review, that's just a recipe for conflict and going nowhere fast.
Agreed. Okay, next up, let's think about the interaction itself. Two-sided versus one-sided, and two-way versus one-way. We already said feedback is a dialogue, right? Which means it can't just be a monologue dump.
Makes sense. It needs back and forth.
Two-way feedback is vital because context matters so much. Imagine a team lead gives feedback on a big, ambitious project, saying it had too many unexpected technical risks.
Okay.
Now, the person who led the project needs the chance to respond, right? They might need to say, actually, I deliberately kept those risks visible in the report because the client specifically asked for cutting-edge tech, and the research shows this level of risk is the trade-off.
Ah, okay. So without that back and forth.
If it's one way, the team lead might just assume incompetence. If it's two-way, the lead understands the client constraint. And the conversation shifts from you failed to, okay, given that constraint, how can we better manage these risks next time? That's where real mutual growth happens.
That context is everything.
And speaking of context, we also need to consider solicited versus unsolicited and offered versus imposed.
This seems to be about timing and readiness, right?
Exactly. When someone asks you, hey, could you spare 15 minutes to look over the logic in my proposal and give me some feedback? That's solicited. They're asking for it. They've signaled they're ready, open, looking for input. Their psychological defenses are likely already lower.
Whereas unsolicited feedback or feedback just kind of dumped on you without warning?
Yeah, that often triggers that immediate whoa, back off reaction, even if the feedback itself is actually spot on and valuable. The sources suggest that how and when feedback is delivered, getting permission, choosing the right moment can be just as critical as the content. A good leader might wait or ask, is now a good time for me to share a couple of thoughts on that last presentation?
Simple courtesy, but powerful.
Okay.
Okay, we also have the time dimension. Current versus historic, and relevant versus irrelevant.
Yes. Feedback needs to be timely. If I bring up a mistake you made on a report 6 months ago, honestly, you can barely remember the context, who was involved, what the pressure was like.
Yeah, the details are fuzzy.
Right. The brain link between the action and the consequence is gone. But if I address an issue 5 minutes after it happens, the memory is fresh, the learning opportunity is right there, maximized.
And it has to be relevant too, right? If I'm trying desperately to get better at, say, budget forecasting, and my manager keeps giving me feedback on my email sign-off.
It's noise. It's irrelevant to your current focus, your professional goal right now. It just diverts your mental energy away from where you need it.
Makes sense. Okay, what's left?
Finally, we have to acknowledge the human element. Recognizes emotions versus ignores emotions. And open versus closed.
The feelings part.
Yeah. A closed approach treats feedback like debugging a machine. Just the facts, no feelings. An open approach acknowledges that, hey, being critiqued can be tough. It carries emotional weight.
So an example of open might be?
A manager might say something like, look, I know the pressure you were under to hit that deadline was immense, and I really appreciate the late nights you put in. And we still need to talk about the data points that got missed in that rush so we can figure out how to prevent it next time.
Okay, so you acknowledge the effort, the context, the emotion before diving into the problem area. Builds trust.
Exactly. And just to wrap up this architecture bit, There are a few other key attributes the sources bundle together. Constructive feedback should be intimate and individual, not just generic advice copied from a manual. It needs to be empowering. It should open doors, suggest next steps, offer possibilities, not just slam the door on the effort.
Like, here's how you could improve, not just, this wasn't good enough.
Precisely. And crucially, it has to be manageable. Don't give someone a list of 20 things they did wrong. That just leads to overwhelm, analysis paralysis. Pick one or two key actionable items.
Okay, so that detailed architecture really sets the standard for the person giving the feedback. But now the focus shifts, doesn't it? The power to actually use that input, to internalize it, that falls squarely on the learner, on the recipient. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because the sources give us this powerful tool for, like, checking ourselves, the feedback ladder.
Yes, the feedback ladder is a great model. It basically maps out the emotional and psychological journey we go through when we receive criticism, moving from the lead constructive reactions up towards the most beneficial ones.
Okay, walk us through the rungs.
Right at the bottom, the lowest rung, is reject. The person just ignores the feedback entirely. Maybe they think it's relevant or biased or just not worth thinking about. There's zero engagement.
Okay, Stonewall, what's next?
If they move up a bit, they hit defend. This is classic, right?
Yeah.
Arguing back. Questioning the source's credibility, finding reasons why the feedback giver is wrong. That's not fair, or you weren't even there, you don't understand what was really going on.
I recognize that one.
Then comes explain. Now, you're not necessarily attacking the source anymore, but you are busy justifying your past actions. Okay, yes, I missed the deadline, but that was only because the procurement team held up the supplies for 3 whole days. It wasn't my fault.
So providing context, maybe, but still focused backwards on why it happened.
Exactly. It's still about justifying the past, not changing the future. The really critical turning point on the ladder is the next rung. Understand. This takes some psychological stillness. You have to pause, process the information as objectively as you can, and really try to internalize it without immediately judging it or making excuses.
Just listening.
Just listening and trying to grasp the core message. And then the highest rung, the ultimate goal for professional development, is change. Taking concrete action based on the input you received, actually modifying your behavior for the next time.
That ladder is such a useful diagnostic tool for ourselves, isn't it? If you feel that rush of adrenaline, that defensiveness kicking in when someone offers critique, you know, instantly, okay, I'm stuck down here on defend or maybe explain. The goal then becomes consciously using that awareness, that metacognition, to try and climb up to understand and then commit to change.
Let's take an example. Say you bomb a job interview, you get the rejection. Your immediate gut reaction might be, their questions were ridiculous, the whole process was flawed. That's deafening. Then maybe you shift to, well, I only failed because my last boss never gave me enough experience with budgeting, unlike the other candidates. That's explain. Still blaming externally.
Okay.
But the moment you manage to climb to understand, you might think, okay, the feedback email said my answer to the leadership question lacked structure. I get it now. They were probably looking for something like the STAR method framework, and I just rambled.
Okay. You see the gap from their perspective.
Exactly. And then you can get to change.
Yeah.
Right. Before my next interview, I'm going to spend a week practicing structuring my answers to behavioral questions using STAR. That conscious shift, moving up the ladder, that's what unlocks the value in feedback.
But just waiting passively for feedback isn't the way, is it? The sources emphasize being proactive. You have to actively seek it out and have a plan for using it. They laid out 4 key steps for really making the most of any input you get.
Yeah, the first step is absolutely foundational. Know the criteria. Before you even start a task, you need to find out what success actually looks like. What are the intended learning outcomes? What are the standards? And importantly, how do those link to your own personal goals? If you don't know the target you're aiming for, you can't possibly measure how far off you are.
So if you're writing a report, don't just start writing. First, find out. Does the grading prioritize being concise or having great visuals? Or is it all about the depth of the data analysis? You need to know where to put your effort.
Exactly. Step 2, which we touched on earlier, is always ask for concreteness. Never settle for vague statements. If a colleague says, that presentation didn't quite land for me, you must follow up.
Don't let them off the hook.
Right. Ask. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Can you give me maybe 1 or 2 specific examples of what felt confusing? Or maybe how I could make the opening hook stronger next time? You're basically doing the work to turn potentially useless mainstream feedback into actionable, insightful feedback.
Good point. Okay, step 3.
Step 3 is discuss and reflect. Once you get the input, don't just file it away mentally or physically. Talk about it. Discuss it with teachers, mentors, trusted peers. Get different perspectives, especially if you receive conflicting feedback. And crucially, keep a note of it. Keep a feedback journal or log so you can systematically reflect later on how you'll actually use it for development in your next attempt.
That systematic part seems key, not just letting it bounce off.
And finally, step 4 is maybe the peak of developing that self-directed learning capability. Self-evaluation. You need to get in the habit of evaluating your own task against those established criteria before you submit it or before you consider it finished.
So like being your own critic first.
Exactly. And this isn't just about proofreading for typos. It's about developing the skill to honestly apply the standard, the required criteria, to your own output. Can you make a well-founded, objective judgment about the quality of your own work? When you can do that consistently, you start to internalize the judgment mechanism itself. You become less reliant on external people for basic calibration. You become your own best and, importantly, your most constant feedback source.
Okay, we've spent a good chunk of time on the external piece, getting good feedback. Now we need to pivot. We need to look at the internal processing loop, reflection. Because without effective reflection, even the most brilliant, constructive feedback just sits there, right? It's just information on paper or maybe in an email. Inert, useless.
That distinction is absolutely vital. The sources define reflection really clearly. It's not just, casually thinking back on what happened. It's defined as a conscious and deliberate reinvestment of mental energy.
Okay, conscious and deliberate.
Right. Aimed at exploring and elaborating one's understanding of the problem one has faced or is facing, rather than aimed at simply trying to solve it.
Okay, that reframing is really important. Exploring understanding rather than just solving.
Exactly. Think about it. When you're solving a problem, like pulling an all-nighter to fix a critical database bug that just crashed the system, you are laser-focused on the immediate execution. Get it working now.
Right. Firefighting mode.
Totally. Reflection is the systematic review after the fire's out, after the bug is fixed. It's asking, why did that bug even happen? Was our initial code architecture flawed?
Yeah.
How did our team react? Was our response time good compared to best practice? How could we have caught it earlier in testing? It's not about the quick fix. It's about deep structural learning to stop it happening again.
Got it. It's the postmortem, but with a focus on future prevention, not just blame.
Precisely. And that's why reflection is so critical for development. It drives that meaningful, deep learning. It gets you past just memorizing facts or procedures, surface knowledge, towards real understanding. And it's increasingly seen as a non-negotiable skill in any complex professional job, especially in fields where things are always changing and you need to adapt constantly.
And the really big payoff, the sources suggest, is its direct link to developing adaptive expertise.
Yes. Adaptive expertise is what really separates the true experts from people who are just, very efficient novices. A novice might be super fast and accurate at routine, predictable tasks, but an adaptive expert, they can take their knowledge and apply it creatively to new situations, complex problems, things they haven't seen before.
We can improvise effectively based on deep principles.
Exactly. And we found a really compelling piece of evidence in the research showing the practical value here. Studies have shown that a more reflective approach is specifically associated with better diagnostic accuracy when dealing with complex problems.
Wow. So literally pausing to reflect on the diagnostic process makes doctors, for example, better at getting the diagnosis right.
That's what the evidence suggests, which is pretty powerful.
Okay, so if reflection is the pathway to becoming that adaptive expert, how do we actually do it? It can feel a bit vague. Just think harder. We need structure.
We do. And the sources point us towards a really helpful framework, Schoen's model of reflection, Donald Schoen. It outlines 5 distinct elements that provide a systematic way to learn from experience, especially unexpected experience.
Okay, lay it out for us. What are the 5 elements?
All right, element 1 is knowing in action. This is basically your autopilot expertise. Think of an experienced surgeon making an incision or a seasoned negotiator reading the room. They're doing complex things fluidly, almost automatically, without consciously thinking through every single micro step.
Right, it's ingrained skill, tacit knowledge.
Exactly. Then element 2 is surprise. Something unexpected happens. It breaks that smooth flow of knowing in action. For the negotiator, maybe the other side suddenly throws in a completely new, non-negotiable demand right at the end of the talks. The routine is shattered.
Okay, the curveball.
That surprise then triggers element 3, reflection and action. This is the thinking you do on your feet, in the moment, to try and correct the problem while it's happening. The negotiator can't just call a timeout. They're rapidly thinking, okay, I can't agree to that, but if I just say no right now, the whole deal might blow up. What's a quick pivot? What are their underlying interests I can appeal to? It's thinking while you're still in the thick of it.
Real-time problem solving under pressure.
Element 4 is experimentation. This is where you actually try a new response, deliberately, because of that reflection in action. The negotiator might try a counterintuitive move, maybe offer a small, unexpected concession on something minor, not to give in, but to try and trade it for a key piece of information they still need. They're actively testing a hypothesis, live.
Trying something new based on the surprise.
Yes. And finally, element 5, which is often where the deepest learning happens, is reflection on action. This is the systematic analysis after the event is over. The negotiation is done. Now the expert sits down, reviews their notes, thinks back. Why did that last-minute demand catch me off guard? Were there earlier signals I missed? How should I change my preparation strategy next time to anticipate that kind of tactic? This analysis shifts the learning from just fixing the immediate issue to making strategic, long-term changes to your approach.
That's a really powerful model. It gives names to the different stages of learning, from surprises, from things not going to plan. But the question remains, how do we get better at this? Reflection can feel like a very personal, maybe even innate skill. Can it actually be taught or fostered?
That's the encouraging part. The sources are quite clear. Reflection skills can be actively developed and fostered, provided you have a supportive environment.
Okay, how? What helps?
They list several key factors. First, simple practice is essential. Often this takes the form of structured reflective writing, keeping a journal, filling out reflection logs after significant events, making it a habit. Second, having appropriate mentoring and supervision is really helpful. A good mentor can guide your reflection, asking probing questions, helping you see patterns you might miss, and importantly, stopping you from just, dwelling on negative feelings without extracting the learning.
Right, keeping it productive.
Third, group discussion and peer learning. Talking through a difficult situation or a surprise with colleagues who face something similar. That offers huge insights into different ways of reacting and thinking. You learn from their reflections too.
Sharing the load and the learning.
Fourth, consciously leveraging your past experience. Reflection helps you categorize and index those past failures and successes, turning them into a mental database you can draw on when facing new challenges.
Building your internal knowledge base.
Exactly. And finally, perhaps the most practical point, you need to ensure there's dedicated train flow, time for reflection actually built into the workflow. If you're constantly rushing from task A to task B to task C with no pauses, reflection simply won't happen. You'll stay stuck in that purely execution mode, never getting to the learning mode.
Okay, so let's try and pull all these threads together. We've gone deep on the external input side, what makes for truly constructive feedback. And we've explored the internal mechanism, that conscious, systematic process of reflection, maybe using Shun's model. Now, if the individual learner is doing their part, they're climbing the feedback ladder, they're reflecting what kind of environment, what kind of ecosystem does the workplace or the school need to provide for both of these processes to really thrive and lead to growth.
Yeah, this synthesis is crucial. It connects the individual's effort to the system they're operating in. The sources identify what they call 7 pillars, basically, 7 characteristics of a good learning context. These are the environments that genuinely support the development of adaptive expertise and help people grow faster.
All right, let's walk through these 7 pillars. What's the first one?
The first pillar is maybe one of the trickiest to actually create: metacognitive control, reflective learning. The environment itself has to explicitly encourage and ideally reward people thinking about how they learn, not just focusing solely on what they produce.
So managers and teachers need to be asking those, why did that work? Or what was your thinking process there? Questions, not just grading the final output or hitting the target.
Exactly. It's about valuing the learning process itself. Pillar number 2 is relevant learner activity. The tasks people are doing, the work itself, has to feel meaningful and applicable to their goals. If the work is just abstract theory or seems pointless to the learner, well, the effort they put into the feedback and reflection loop on that task feels wasted.
Right. A good context makes sure the work has real-world relevance, stakes that matter to the person doing it.
Absolutely. Contrast that with, say, a medical student only reviewing old textbook case studies instead of interacting with actual patients or realistic simulations. The feedback loop just lacks that critical relevance needed for deep, sticky learning.
Makes sense. Pillar 3.
Pillar 3 is central to everything we've discussed. Formative feedback. The environment must provide that continuous, descriptive, actionable feedback, all those characteristics we detailed back in section 2. And it needs to happen throughout the learning process, not just as a final grade or an annual performance review. If the organization only gives feedback once a year, the system is fundamentally broken for development.
Okay. Pillar 4.
Fourth, we need appropriate motivation. The environment should foster motivation that's tied to growth, to mastering the skill or subject, not just driven by chasing external rewards like grades, bonuses, or quick promotions. Intrinsic motivation, the desire to get better for its own sake, is far more resilient when you're facing tough feedback or grappling with complex reflection.
Yeah, it keeps you going when things get hard. Okay, number 5.
The fifth pillar is having a base of interconnected knowledge. Learning doesn't happen effectively in isolated little silos. A good learning context makes sure that new concepts are explicitly linked to what the learner already knows. Instructors or managers need to deliberately draw those connections, build those conceptual maps, showing how today's discussion about, say, software architecture connects back to last week's session on project management principles.
Helping people build that bigger mental model.
Exactly. Pillar number 6 is social learning. We really can't overstate the value of interaction with peers, with mentors. It provides different perspectives. It combats that feeling of isolation when you fail or struggle, and it's where you often get that rich, high-quality peer feedback that's essential for a full 360-degree understanding.
Learning together, not just alone.
Mm-hmm. And finally, the seventh pillar, which is kind of the bedrock for everything else, teaching quality. Or, in a workplace context, maybe guidance quality. You need clear instructions, effective delivery of information, well-designed tasks or curriculum. It's non-negotiable. If the initial guidance or teaching is confusing, inaccurate, or poorly structured, then the whole feedback and reflection loop just gets bogged down trying to fix fundamental misunderstandings instead of being able to focus on refining true expertise.
So if the foundation is shaky, the rest can't be strong.
Pretty much. These 7 pillars, taken together, they basically create the ecosystem needed for that feedback reflection loop to actually work properly and lead towards adaptive expertise. They help move the learner from being just a reactive novice waiting for external fixes towards becoming a strategic, self-aware expert who has really strong self-assessment skills. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow, that was a really comprehensive deep dive into the whole architecture of getting better, wasn't it? Just a quick recap of the absolute essentials. Feedback. It's the dialogue about your performance, and it must be descriptive, specific, and focused on changeable behavior, not personality. Reflection. That's the conscious, systematic analysis you do after the effort, that deliberate reinvestment of mental energy. And the ultimate goal of this whole feedback reflection system, it's always about behavior change and developing that capacity for self-directed learning.
And it's worth repeating. The real value, the utility of this entire framework, it depends completely on what you, the listener, do with the information you get. Whether that's external feedback from others or internal insights from your own reflection, you have to actively work to climb that feedback ladder, get past the emotional gut reactions of defend and explain, and push yourself towards the action-oriented stages of understand and change.
Be proactive.
Yeah, seek out the criteria up front, always ask for concrete examples, make time for reflection.
And we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that really ties this all together, specifically around the everyday power of that systematic reflection piece. We mentioned that finding that a reflective approach actually improves diagnostic accuracy in really complex, sometimes life or death medical problems.
Yeah, that's a powerful finding.
It really is. So the question for you is, if just a few minutes of structured reflection on action can help a doctor make better decisions, what simple recurring decision in your own life, maybe in your personal finances, or how you communicate in meetings, or how you plan your projects, what decision are you currently missing out on improving, simply because you haven't budgeted 5 minutes today to systematically review the process you used and the outcome you got?
The power to improve is already there, embedded in the data of your own daily experience. You just need to pause and look for it. Go find it.
Until next time, dig deep.